Well, good morning. It's the appointed time for the meeting of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board. We'll begin by saying welcome to everyone that's here and call the meeting to order. I want to begin this morning by introducing a new colleague of ours, Bob Neyland, a very prominent, well-credentialed attorney with a major firm in our city, has been appointed by the mayor and approved by the council to take the Ward 8 seat as a member of the Citizens Advisory Board. Bob has already been a member of the process, serving as a member of the Senior Wellness Center subcommittee. So he's well familiar with some of the things we're already doing, and Bob, we welcome you as a new colleague and offer you the chance to say anything you'd like. This could be your last chance, so say whatever you like.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be part of this group, and was delighted when the mayor extended the invitation. So I think maybe some of you, I've been a strong MAPS supporter from day one, so I have the privilege of working with this group and being part of the process. It's very gratifying, and hope I contribute something to the ongoing process.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you with us, and I want to just comment just briefly further about this. To not only has Bob taken the seat on the Citizens Advisory Board, but Rusty LaForge, his predecessor, has been appointed to the Park Committee and is already serving. Was there at their meeting yesterday and is already a contributing member of that. So his desire to stay involved has been accommodated as well. I want to also say thank you to Zane and to Michael Adams coming in, because they have stepped in. Zane is chairing the Modern Streetcar Transit Committee during Nathaniel's service in Afghanistan, and Michael has accepted the job as the vice chair of that committee. Bob will be moving away from the Senior Wellness Committee and will be chairing the State Fairgrounds Committee. So I guess I wanted to note all of those changes to say thank you to the mayor, a public thank you to the mayor and city council, and to Jim Couch and the city manager's office, and to Eric and David and all those involved in helping us through our first kind of major transition that we've had since we started more than 2 years ago. And I think it bodes well for the future, in that we know now that there's a process in place for dealing with these transitions as they will occur over the next several years. So thank you to all involved for that. You have been provided with a copy of the minutes of the June 28th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections?
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Been moved. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. Item 3 on our agenda is the Revenue and Expenditure Report. Eric, would you provide that for us?
Be happy to, Mr. Chairman. This is the Revenue and Expenditure Report through May 31st. It does include the detail that we've provided in previous months. A couple of things to note. You'll see that total collections, which include interest to date, now exceed $195 million. You'll see that the revenue side, you'll see that we, for the first month of this fiscal year, are over our target projections. It's a staggering number. It's showing 11.7%, but I would just remind you that's just for 1 month. We did have an excellent receipt this past month, but there's several months ahead. So I guard that just slightly, just not knowing what the next 11 will look like. But if you look at the program as a whole, the news is also good. When compared to the original $777 million projection, we are currently about 3.6% over, and that equates to about $6.6 million. And so the news is good. And so with that, I can answer any additional questions that you might have.
Michael, as our resident.
I have no questions or comments. I've looked over the report. It's fine. And I would move that we receive it.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we receive the Revenue and Expense Report. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The report is received. Item 4, we have before us a resolution approving Phase 1 feasibility study for the MAPS 3 River Race Course windscreen project. Eric, would you provide us about the information about that?
Yes, if you'll recall, last summer we actually engaged the contract with Elliott & Associates to study the feasibility of a windscreen on the Oklahoma River. Today we're pleased to bring that report to you. We do have Rand Elliott with us today that's going to come up and make a presentation to give you those findings. I think some of the things that you're going to see is the original budget for this project, which is included in your packet, is $1.5 million. And those were based on some very preliminary estimates without any information. And so there is a new figure that Rand is going to report to us, and some of the additional material selections and how far the windscreen and how tall and all of those things. And so with that, we'd like to invite you to the podium, Rand, and we can, of course, have questions and answers following.
Welcome, Rand.
Good morning, Rand Elliott, 425 Northwest 15th. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for inviting us to come and to share this. It's a very exciting time to be in Oklahoma City and to be a part of all the wonderful things that are in process as a result of the MAPS program. Eric has done a great job of giving you a baseline for this. Our goal was to create or to do a study that we felt good about in terms of it being able to confirm that a windscreen would be a valuable addition to the river and to do a good job there, to be built in such a way that it would be low maintenance and that it would be something attractive as well. And we did a number of solutions or options, if you will, and I think we passed around a small packet for you today. And I thought if I could go through that, is this button the... Oh, sorry. Going the wrong way. I'm sorry. Is there a... I just need a red arrow. Oh, that's left. Okay. Oh, they can't see that anymore. Okay. Very good. So left and right. I'm sorry. Thank you. All this high technology. There are two options here. Option one is actually reflective of the first approach that we took, which was to meet a $1.8 million budget. And the components of the windscreen are a result of working with CPP engineers out of Colorado who specialize in wind engineering data and programs. They built a computer model as well as a wind tunnel test model to make sure that the concepts that were developed would be effective, and they did so. The final approach was to do a windscreen that is, oops, that's number 4. Sorry. I'm going to go backwards. Okay, number 1. There are a couple of criteria that's important to know about the building of the windscreen and to make it the most effective. If you were to go to the river this morning and look at it, you would notice that the water is glassy along the south edge of the river, and that as you get closer to the center and to the north edge of the river, it has ripples on it. Well, that's the effect of the wind this time of the year, in particular coming from the south. And so as we worked with Mike Knopp on this process, if we were to completely stop the wind from touching the river, the required windscreen would have to be 60 feet tall. And through the process with Mike, it was determined that fairness and uniformity was more important than stopping the wind completely. It's also an economic consideration. And so the final choices were to do a 40-foot tall windscreen, to have a 10-foot opening at the bottom, and the windscreen itself is 50% porous. So imagine a perforated a piece of metal that was 50% open and 50% closed, and that those were the ideal conditions in order to control this. The value is, if you imagine the engineering aspect of it, when the wind comes from the south and hits the windscreen, it basically deflects it over, and it has a trajectory, and the trajectory is based on height, and your goal is to try to get it to go as far north as you can so that you avoid hitting the water and creating ripples, if you will, or inconsistencies in the surface of the water. Well, what we were able to determine is that with this 10-foot high opening at the bottom, there's a small amount of air that actually squirts through the bottom and does move across the river, and it creates consistency and uniformity about the surface. And so it's not about making the entire river glossy, it's about making it uniform from the south side of the river to the north side of the river. And Mike, in his number of events that he's having and discussions with coaches, it was far preferred for it to be uniform, whatever level that was, and consistent, so that everybody had the same conditions for rowing. So that's the way we approached it. The concept includes the perforated metal, as I said. We did a series of pros and cons with each of the 4 ideas. The notion of certainly cost was there. If you'll notice on number 1, it protects all the lanes from the prevailing winds for length of the windscreen. And in particular, option 1 was 338 meters. It was based on the fact that we had, in essence, $1.8 million in a budget, and we kind of worked backwards to get that number to work. We also noted that it provides a demonstration piece to display visual images. One of the things that is a goal at the river is to actually be able to do projected images, whether they be streaming video of the event going on or an advertisement or any number of things. It would actually be a drive-in movie screen kind of thing, for the lack of a better description. Certainly, the idea of providing as much protection as possible. At 338 meters, there is an event called a 200-meter sprint, and so it was able to protect that specifically. The premier race is 1,000 meters, which goes to the I-35 bridge, and the goal ultimately was to do 1,000 meters, the full 1,000 meters of it. As we went back through the process based on funding and so forth, there is a hope that ultimately the entire 1,000 meters will be complete. But the ultimate goal here today is a 500-meter course. This works very nicely with the river lighting program because it's also for lighting 500 meters, and so you have 500 meters of windscreen and 500 meters of river lighting, and so it makes a premier course at that level. So that is option 1. Option 2 is the same. Option 2 is the same, except we incorporated the idea that with $3.3 million, which is our current estimate, this current estimate was the result of determining how much the river lighting was going to be, and the difference between the total budget and the river lighting provided the budget for the windscreen project. And so it currently is at $3.3 million. What this allows us to do is to do the 500-meter course, which we're really excited about, and it provides this companion piece for the river lighting. So option number 2 is the same idea, except it allows us to go the full 500 meters. One thing that's very important about this process that we've done intentionally is that if you look at the concept, you see columns every 24 feet, 10 feet off the ground, 30 feet of windscreen material above that. The idea is that because it is modular, it allows us to add or subtract pieces as we go along. If our budget came in at $3.4 million and we needed to pull back, we would just reduce the number of panels. If we come in under and we want to add a couple, it allows us to do the same thing. And so it's a very effective way to monitor and deal with the project itself as well as meeting budget requirements. And so we're very excited about that possibility. So the only difference between 1 and 2 is the additional distance and budget. Number 3 is trees. And one of the things that you would imagine is that what if we just did trees? And we did a study with our landscape architect as well as using our wind engineering folks to make this evaluation. And in the end, it was determined that this would be actually more maintenance and more ongoing issues than it would be to do a fabricated element versus a natural one. And as you can see, this particular one at 1,000 meters was $5.2 million. And then the last one was the notion of doing concept 4, which was, is it possible in the early plans to actually reduce the height of it? And this reflects a 30-foot tall total. And we went through this exercise with our wind engineers, and they basically said this would be an ineffective solution. But we needed to do that. We wanted to do one on both ends of the spectrum, and this was the lowest one, and it proved to be ineffective. So we did not recommend this concept. I think that's all 4, and I'm happy to answer questions that you might have about details. And if I was not clear, I'm happy to be more clear.
Questions?
Rand, what is the
Yes,
substrate that the screen is made from?
It's perforated metal panels, and I'm going to use a very simple kind of comparison. A screen in your window at home has a crosshatch to it, if you will, and it's woven material. Well, perforated metal is punched holes through a piece of steel, if you will, that still maintains its strength but allows air to move through it. And so our proposal, and we went through some 76 different materials to come up with this in terms of the most economic solution. We would do a finish that's called powder coating, and it is a high-performance finish, not like just going out and painting it with a spray rig or with a brush, that gives it a much longer life. And one of the mandates to us was to be sure we design something that can be constructed and will be long-lasting in terms of maintenance. The city did not want to have a maintenance issue over the long haul. So it is a very economical material. It's fabricated every day. It's a commodity, if you will. We do a powder-coated finish. We have a really good product. You're welcome.
Sue?
Yes, ma'am.
Question. What's the top end as far as the wind velocity that it can take?
Great discussion. The city code requirements that all structures in general like this have to meet a 90-mile-an-hour wind speed. And that's what this one does. It meets that criteria as well. So you have to do that. Along those lines, you might find it very interesting that, for example, if there was 18 miles of an hour wind on the river, the windscreen would reduce it to 4 or 5 miles per hour. So it is a dramatic shift in terms of the benefits to the performance on the river itself.
So, Rand, when I was reading the material, I noticed that one of the protocols for the races is at a certain wind speed, they don't race.
That's exactly right.
So what's the speed?
It's a very interesting thing. I mean, typically, they suggest that 30 miles an hour, if the wind speed is a sustained 30 miles an hour, then you make a judgment call. And we all know that the weather and the wind is unpredictable in Oklahoma, and that's why we love it. But it's a management question, and Mike and his crew would have to make a decision about that. That's the other benefit of having the opportunity to have night racing. As we know, once the sun goes down, the wind speed generally reduces, and Mike could postpone a race till after 6 o'clock or something like that because he would have lighting that would allow him to have a backup plan, if you will, to be able to do that. So that's the plan.
Okay, one more question.
Sure.
I know you have those Colorado wind experts, so what did they tell you about the direction of wind? I mean, what's the percent that we get the south wind?
It's a wonderful and interesting process to having been through this. We've all kind of lived with wind all of our lives and have accepted it. We complain about it from time to time, but for the most part we accept it. It's amazing. I would have, if I had not seen the study myself, I would have said that the predominant location was from the southwest at the windy times of the year, and it's actually the southeast. And they did a whole series of studies based on annual wind speeds and directions and so forth, literally all 365 days of the year, and determined that the most predominant winds are from the southeast.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rand, does that mean that most of the races would then be scheduled during the times when the wind is predominantly where the windscreen would help rather than when the wind's from the north? Is that scheduling?
It is, Tom, and generally speaking, the racing season is spring through fall. It's not in the winter time generally, even though there is Olympic training going on, and that's a very important piece of the puzzle. There are trials that are going on. There are people that row and canoe kayak in wetsuits, so it is an important piece of the puzzle on an ongoing basis. And the goal here, if Mike were talking about this, he would tell you that it is one of the things that is something that holds us back in terms of our facility and our course being recognized on a local, national, and international basis. And so this improvement makes Oklahoma City a could make us a premier location for doing events of all kinds of nature. I mean, he's in London now, going to talk to folks about the facilities in Oklahoma City, and we believe that over a period of time, it's already begun to say that Oklahoma City is the center of the rowing industry these days, and the Canoe and Kayak Group has come to Oklahoma City as well. It's becoming an international location for these kinds of events, and this just makes it better. It allows it to be a more flawless experience as opposed to having something that's wrong, if you will.
I know that Mike is going to, or has left for the
Yes.
Olympics. Will we see anything on TV that we're talking about here? I mean, did they make any special accommodations about wind or lighting or anything like that?
That's a great question.
for
I
this
do
year's
not
Olympics?
know the answer if there's a windscreen in London or not. I would gather to say that probably there's not wind like Oklahoma, but I don't know that for a fact.
You bet. Dee, did your committee have any comment that they wanted to provide us?
Sorry, we are happy to be moving ahead and making progress, and also being able to get this under wraps so that we can start with the water park, and so we're very pleased.
Now, Rand and Eric, what you're asking us to do today is to approve the feasibility study. We're not, have the options all been vetted? I mean, but what we're seeing here, you're asking us to approve the study. Is that right?
So the answer is yes. If you recall, last summer when we started this endeavor, we really didn't know much about a windscreen. There weren't a lot of comparisons for us to make, and so the many months that have passed, I mean, there's been a lot of research. You'll see that in the study there's a lot of details. You'll see some of the wind tunnel testing. You'll see graphs and charts and things that show there's cause for us to move ahead. And so with that said, receiving this report today and allowing us to take this to City Council will allow us to take that next step would be to go into formal design. And so the next item on your agenda on how you approve this is to amend the contract with Elliott & Associates to start formal design services, using some of the data that's already been collected to help us find a project that is more what Rand has discussed, probably something on the magnitude of option 2, maximizing the budget that's available with a windscreen that is shown to perform, and they'll do the additional research and study then.
All right, then. What's before us is item 4 on your... Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Question?
I'm sure.
Quick question, if I may.
Certainly.
Is there any noise issue with the perforations in the metal? I just sort of picture this whistling sound coming through the windscreen.
Well, I suspect that anytime you create a sense of friction, there could be some small amount of that. This is a pretty large surface, and it's not like a crack in your window and something whistling at a high pitch or any of that sort of thing. This is a broad kind of thing, and we don't expect it to be of any consequence.
Thank you.
Michael?
I would just, I guess, like to add, I think that if you saw the detail that was in the studies, they did a lot of work, and as Rand mentioned, I think 70-some different materials, different heights, different porosity, looking at all sorts of things, and so it's obviously a very detailed study there. I think one of the things, too, that the benefits of this with the 10-foot gap, I see a lot of benefits there because it allows people to walk under and around it. It's easy maintenance. It's up off the ground where it won't be as easy to vandalize. And so I think there's some advantages to the 10-foot height or 10-foot gap also in that regard. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, I think we had a little bit of confusion in our meeting, and I just wanted to clarify here. It appears here that we're raising our budget somewhere on this related to this project, but in phase 1 of the river projects, we had a total of $6.4 million construction budget for lighting and windscreens. And if you recall, I think at the last meeting, we let the contract for the lighting, which was at 3.1. So the 6.4 less the 3.1 leaves us 3.3 for the windscreen, and that's where the number came from. It appears in here that we had a budget of $1.5 million, and somehow we're raising the budget, but it's more of going to be backing out or backing down to what's available after the lighting project. So.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say that our committee was very happy at the aspect that we can add to or take back these panels if we need to go with our budget. That was a big concern to everybody.
Thank you, Dee. Other questions for Rand or otherwise? Kim?
These panels would, of course, be insured, wouldn't they?
I'm sorry, they would be insured?
Against damage
Sure.
through some policy of the city?
You know, it would be treated like any other capital improvement of the city. The city does pull insurance policies for buildings. We're also self-insured to some levels, but it would be a city-owned windscreen, just like anything else along the river that was constructed by the city. We treat it as such. So we'd have risk analysis and make sure that the proper policy was investigated.
Kim, that was one of the reasons, excuse me, why we chose to do metal versus fabrics. There are some fabrics and things like that that have been previously used, but generally in places where they don't have hail the size of grapefruits. So we decided that metal might stand up a little bit better to that.
Other questions? All right, then, you have before you and in your packet the resolution approving the Phase 1 feasibility study for the River Racecourse windscreen. What's your pleasure? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution and receive it. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. That then moves us to item 5 on the agenda, and the contract for architectural services. Eric, you want to tell us about that?
So as we finish up the investigative phase, we're now ready to proceed with preliminary design. We've talked about that, and also bidding and final plans. And so it's a very similar experience as to what we've just done with the river lighting program. We're finally to that point now where we know what the scope of work for the windscreens is. And I think, as Mike alluded to, you'll find on here is that we are anticipating a budget for the project now of $3.3, and this does fall within the implementation plan budget for the Phase 1 work. And so the contract with Elliott & Associates was negotiated as such to increase their services for that additional design. And so it's an increase of $224,400 for a total contract, including additional services of $405,132. Expectations moving forward, if the contract is approved, is that we have about 60 days included for a preliminary report. Elliott & Associates would create that report and come back to the subcommittees and the advisory board with the more detailed information. Upon its approval, then move into final plans. And so it's very much following a typical process that we'll see for design and construction. And with that, I can answer any additional questions you might have.
Questions? If there are no questions, would you approve the contract? Been moved that we approve it. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we approve the consultant review committee, or the amendment to the contract and the contract itself. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. It's approved. Rand, wanted to thank you for being with us today, and while I have a chance to say this, I want to tell you what an impact you've had on the river. We're delighted to see all the great things that you've designed on the river, and this next step is equally important, and I just wanted you to know how appreciative that I am personally and that we are for the great work that you've done for our city.
Tom, thank you very much, and it's very kind for you to say that, but it's truly team play. We are living in Oklahoma City at a time unlike anything I've ever seen in my lifetime, and the city and all of us are playing as a team. And I think the Thunder gave us a great example of what that's like, and we appreciate Eric and all the folks at the city allowing us to be a part of this process, and we're terribly excited to be contributors to making our city a better place.
Thank you, Rand. Next item, it would be item 6. Is that right, Eric?
It is.
The Consultant Review Committee report. All right.
The item 6 that you have today, we had, of course, we're now ready to proceed with the negotiation of a contract for the design and engineering of the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Whitewater facility. So it appears that we're having a river day today. But with that, we've obviously made significant progress. Whitewater is the next on that list. And we received 5 proposals from firms, and we interviewed 4 of those. And you do have the consulting report attached. And I would tell you that a really interesting process, and I think some of the things that we found was these firms each knew each other very well. They travel the world for these types of projects, and so it was a worldwide response. And some of the individuals that work on one team previously worked for another team, and there's also some highly specialized products that are used in whitewater course design. You're going to see a lot of things in the future, regardless of which firm we went with. some of the same technologies are being used by each. And so it was a very difficult decision, and it was very close. But ultimately, the consultant review committee, which also included members of the subcommittee and the team, have recommended Elliott S2O Design and Engineering as the firm that we'd like to proceed with negotiations. The other firms were McLaughlin, Recreational Engineering and Planning, and Liquid Design. Again, all excellent firms, very close, but we're recommending today Elliott S2O Design.
Who was S2O Design?
S2O is the primary subconsultant that Elliott has selected that's the whitewater expert. And so when we start talking about hydraulics, when we start talking about course, when we start looking at things of that sort, the gentleman's name was Shipley. He's a former Olympic competitor. He's also a registered engineer. And so he had been a part of that interview as the leading consultant on Elliott's team. And each brought that component. And so what I would tell you is each of the teams was similarly staffed. They had somebody that had built race courses before. They'd had several that were former recreational or competitive kayaker and canoe experts. And so, again, it was a highly engaged process. There were a lot of questions that were asked. So Shipley is the lead on S2O Design.
Thank you. Dee or Michael, you have anything you want to add?
I sat through some of the interviews. I wasn't able to make all of them, but I agree with Eric. They were all very well qualified, and it was interesting at how many of these whitewater parks have been built around the world, because I thought this was something fairly unique, but I guess there are a number of them, particularly in Europe, and that a lot of these people have been involved or claim to have been involved in various different ones at various different stages. These are engineers, architects, or something. So it was interesting to kind of sort through what the involvement was in each of them and how they'd all gone. But I was impressed with the qualifications of each of the firms.
Anything else on this? All right then. Our duty today is to receive the committee's report and authorize the negotiation. Do you want to move that? Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we receive the committee's report and recommend the resolution that's included in your packet. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The recommended resolution is adopted. Item 7 on our agenda comes from the Transit Modern Streetcar Subcommittee recommendations. Eric, would you brief us?
I'd be happy to. There are two items, this and the next item, that came directly from the Transit Subcommittee meeting, and I think what I'll do is I'll introduce briefly, but I think I'll let Zane maybe include some more details. There's been discussion from the Transit Subcommittee regarding the new Boulevard project, coordination, city's involvement, and of course some things that have been brought to their attention or levels of concern that they wanted to share with you as the advisory board for consideration to take these on to the City Council. And so there are actually two items. In this first item, and both of these recommendations begin the same, and I think that there is an acknowledgement that there is ongoing design coordination that is already happening between Oklahoma City and ODOT. And of course they acknowledge that and they appreciate that, and but there's this recommendation on item 7 is that the planning of the locations of the transit infrastructure, the rails, the switching, the ducts, the electrical, the communications, the stops, all those components of a modern streetcar system be expedited so that any information that is developed can be provided to ODOT before they finish the design plans for the boulevard. Currently, the two schedules aren't completely aligned. Obviously, we've started the planning process. We're in the contract negotiations with Jacobs to be the transit consultant for the MAPS 3 Modern Streetcar project. ODOT's been in design and planning for some time on the Boulevard project, and they're now coming to a point of getting ready to complete some plans. And so, coming from the subcommittee, they'd like to expedite that process. In this case, it would most likely be with Jacobs, to try to develop as much information as possible on the shortest time possible. So I think with that, I'll let Zane fill in as well.
Okay. The only thing I would add to that is that we saw an opportunity to take advantage of what ODOT was doing, and before they got completely involved in redesigning the boulevard and going under the bridges, that we thought we might be able to jump on board and help them take into consideration the infrastructural requirements for a transit system and then not go back a couple of years later and have to tear it all out because they didn't take something into consideration. So this is just a recommendation where we want to pass on to the City Council that we acknowledge that the communications is ongoing, but we want to specifically get started with Jacobs to expedite their planning to help ODOT overcome some issues that may surface during the future.
To bring other members of the subcommittee a little bit up to speed, obviously the city's Public Works Department, which I oversee, has been actively coordinating with ODOT on a series of the ODOT Boulevard projects. It's not one project from a construction perspective. Obviously, the deconstruction, which is well underway and actually nearing a completion, has been going on for months. ODOT's plan is to have originally completed that by the end of this calendar year, and they're clearly going to make that unless something happens. But they're also engaged to finish their project, which includes the relocated I-40 and the boulevard, in a timely fashion. And so with that said, they are moving ahead, and so this may give us an opportunity to hopefully expedite with Jacobs if you so choose to want to move this forward. But we would do that regardless. I mean, I think this, again, is going to be some of those things that you're going to hear from subcommittee levels from time to time, and I think, if anything, it helps us establish a process as staff to hear those at the subcommittee, making sure that those are brought forward to the advisory board for then additional consideration by the City Council. So with your receipt of this recommendation today, we are prepared to include these items, these and ones in the future, in the form of a city manager report to the City Council. This is very much what we did on MAPS 1 and MAPS 2, so it's a process that's been utilized in the past to make sure that the council stays updated. The other advantage that we also have is we typically have a city council member on our committee. Mr. Ryan just happens to be out this week, but we've also got that voice as well. And so I know the City Council will gladly receive the information, and I think we now have a couple of avenues to do that.
All right, then. You have item before you, the receiving the recommendation from the Transit Modern Streetcar Subcommittee. Anything else that you all want to consider?
Go ahead.
I just had one question. As I understood from during the Parks meeting yesterday, that ODOT is planning a public meeting on or about August 21st to unveil initial plans on the boulevard. Would this recommendation be something that Jacobs would then try to have something in advance of that meeting for ODOT, or something that would fall after?
I think at this point, we're still negotiating the contract with Jacobs on fee and scope and some things. And I think the report that David Todd gave to the subcommittee, the transit subcommittee yesterday, was we think we're just weeks away. I mean, we don't think we'll have an item on the next board meeting for your consideration regarding their contract. I'm not sure that that's going to align perfectly with the ODOT public meeting. That public meeting that ODOT is starting to plan is a requirement of the Federal Highways as a part of their project. And obviously, I think that they'll be prepared. I'm sure city staff will also be in attendance. But that meeting is tentative at this point, and I know that they're trying to solidify the plans and the location and the time for that now. But if any questions were to arise, then I think that we could respond at that public meeting. But regardless, I think this gives us an avenue to make sure that Jacobs and anything they do develop will swiftly get that to ODOT for their consideration.
And just to add to that, we were aware of that meeting, but we also were working towards the January 13 date, not necessarily the August meeting.
All right, then. Does anyone want to move that we receive this report and move it forward?
I move that the Citizens Advisory Board receive the report, pass it on to the City Council.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. Further consideration, discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The report is received and forwarded to the City Council. The next item is a companion item.
I would say it's similar. It's a little bit different, Mr. Chairman. It's another recommendation. It begins the same, and again, it acknowledges the efforts of Oklahoma City and ODOT to date. But more specifically, and I'll just excerpt this, I'll read this from there. It recommends the design of the bridge spanning the new boulevard. Now, this is the bridge that is the railroad bridge. It's the bridge that's going to cross the new boulevard just east of E.K. Gaylord, just south of the new hub, so the old Santa Fe station. That the bridge spanning the new boulevard be expanded for future rail service based on the hub study. And the hub study is the study that we previously provided last summer that shows the Santa Fe as the feasible site. It's the site selected. There was a master plan also included with that. For a full build-out scenario of the new boulevard to accommodate all 5 tracks, substructure, support for future superstructure, and future and easy expansion. And so conceptually, what is coming to you from the Transit Subcommittee is to make sure that ODOT is aware that they've reviewed the hub study, that they're working with the ODOT engineers, making sure that the Jacobs consultants have been coordinated with. As you look at the expansion, it's most likely going to occur to the east if you look at that master plan. Currently, rail service other than Amtrak is freight on the current Burlington Northern. But when you look at that study, future passenger service, high-speed rail, and other opportunities may exist. And so as you look at the boulevard, and if you can picture this kind of horizontally, the new boulevard will actually go underneath that rail track on a new underpass. The height from the bottom of the bridge to the top of the road needs to be around 16 feet to make sure that we've got adequate clearance. If tracks are expanded to the east, we need to make sure that to the east it's also still approximately a 16-foot clearance. So before the road actually starts coming back up to the east into Bricktown, that needs to be taken into consideration. And that's really a result of what this needs to do, is to make sure that that's coordinated with the ODOT plans for the new boulevard. So staff is prepared to do so based on the recommendation.
Thank you.
I would just like to add to that. It also, if you're familiar with Norman, they redid the Robinson Crossing for the same rail line, and they also redid the embankments for the track to accommodate the future rail lines there too. So it's a very similar type scenario that they did down there. So it's not just the depth of it, but also to accommodate the rail truss.
All right. Anything else? Well, you have before you then item 8 on the agenda to receive the subcommittee's recommendation and forward it to City Council. Shall we do it?
I move that we so move.
You move it. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we receive this report from the subcommittee and move it forward to the City Council. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. It is received. That brings us to item number 9. Anything, Eric, that needs to be discussed under item 9?
We don't have anything additional today.
All right. Then let's move to item 10, the Citizens Advisory Board Subcommittee reports. And Kimberly, you had a watershed meeting yesterday. Why don't you tell us what you want us to know about it?
Actually, yesterday, I think we had our longest ever park subcommittee meeting. And at one point in time, we even had a gavel sound and the impending transit meeting to let us know it was really time to leave. But we were very well engaged. Yesterday was very exciting in the park subcommittee. We did recognize a new member who is here in our audience today, Debbie Zokar, and we're very glad to have her on board. We also saw updates yesterday from Johnson, who is our engineering contract services, and began to look at all of the utilities that are underneath the property for the park. And to me, I can describe it as a combination of spaghetti and chop suey. A lot of things that you may not think going together, but certainly a lot of things to consider. So we were very well received by that report, and looking forward to the fact that now there's information for everyone to move forward in addition to the parks, but also that will be helpful for streetcar, the boulevard, and then on to the convention center as well. And then I think our coup de grace yesterday was our first meeting with Hargraves and Associates. After our selection and approval from the City Council, many of us were very, very anxious to meet the team that's going to be working with us on the project, talk a little bit about the timetable, and just get a real feeling for what they bring to the table. Certainly not all of the subcommittee members were in on the selection process. We had a very select few, so there's been a little bit of anticipation. And following yesterday's meeting, I had several phone calls and emails from subcommittee members, and they're thrilled. They believe that we've chosen a firm that not only is going to help provide us the greatest master plan we can, but is extremely willing to take in all the facets of public input, the subcommittee, MAPS, the city staff, the council, and also looking at us as a regional and a city as well. So we're extremely excited about that. Thank you.
Any questions? Any questions for Kim? Zane, anything else to report from the Transit Modern Streetcar Committee other than what we've dealt with today?
I would just add to that we had some discussions on the negotiations with the Jacobs Engineering Consultant contract and how that's coming with the city, and we have received a report from David. And then, of course, the two recommendations that we've already passed on. But to add to that, I just want to pass on that we are very seriously interested in making sure that the communication is open between ODOT and the Boulevard and the Transit Committee and all the other in the Parks Committees. But we specifically wanted to make sure that ODOT was taking into consideration the MAP 3 projects. Nothing further to add than that.
Dee, the co-chair of the State Fairgrounds Committee, presided at their subcommittee meeting, and Bob attended his first one, be chairing the next meeting. Either one of you all want to give us a report? Dee?
Yes, I wish Bob would have chaired it, but he didn't, so he said we're very happy to have him, and we know he's going to be an outstanding member. He had lots of really good questions, and we're really looking forward to working with him. And we haven't had a meeting on the State Fairgrounds for several months. We came back, though, with a really good bit of news, and Triad Design, instead of moving lots of earth in to make this new facility possible, they found a way around it at a possible savings of around $1 million. So that was really good news. The master plan will be coming forward in October, and I'd just like this opportunity to thank the staff and all of our people that help us with this. Thank you very much.
Want to add anything, Bob? Well, Dee, while you have the floor, anything else from the River Committee that other than what we've acted on? Wayne, you want to tell us about the Senior Wellness Committee subcommittee meeting?
Yes, we had a meeting yesterday. We're still making progress as far as trying to interview potential partners for the Wellness Center. We had an update from ADG on our progress and everything, and we are making progress towards it. We have interviewed, I believe, 12 potential partners, and in the process we're still trying to get common threads of what we want to offer, but we're still focusing on trying to get a partner that can have some kind of sustainability for wellness centers. We did lose a good member, but we got a good member, Bob here. He's on the citizen board now, advisory board. We did lose him off the subcommittee board, and we're going to really miss him, but we're going to have better.
Any questions for Wayne about the senior wellness? Let's see, Sue, Trails and Sidewalks did not meet this month. Anything you want to tell us about that? Convention Center did not meet this month. I'll just briefly say that two things are in progress. One is the acquisition of the property for the location for the new convention center, and that's a work in progress. The second thing is that we've had, maybe David will correct me, but I think we've had 14 consultant proposals made. It's almost stunning, the quality of the people who've applied to build this convention center for us. You'll know that this is the initial contract just to prepare some schematic drawings and so forth, but the quality of those people, of the proposals we have, I think is really outstanding. And so that process is also in place. More to report probably a month from now. And I think that completes all of the subcommittee reports. Anything else from any of the subcommittees? All right, then, let's move to item 11, the informational items. Eric?
There's just a couple of items that are in your packet today. You're going to find one that is a relocation benefit or a payment of $28,793, and this is something that's going to occur from time to time, as we've talked in the past. This is for one of the parcels that's already been purchased, but in accordance with the relocation policies, this one was an occupied parcel, and these are some expenses that have been accumulated by that previous owner, and so in accordance with that policy, we'll make those payments up to the levels of the contract. And so this is just an informational item for you today. The other is a parks map update, and still probably about the same as we updated last month. You'll notice the majority of the parcels that are south of Southwest 4th Street, everything that you see in those dark blue colors have been basically acquired. Again, I'll just, as a reminder, the areas in the bottom right that are kind of the lighter blue, those are ODOT-owned parcels that will become the property of the city as the I-40 relocation is completed. And up near the top, where the old Interstate 40 was, you'll see that we're now starting to get some dark blue shading, and I think that you'll see that progress here in the coming months. We've had to file condemnation on some of those parcels, and so we'll just continue to update you in the future. But obviously, substantially completed on the acquisition process. It's timely with the work that's getting ready to begin on the Parks project, and so I think things have gone very well. Can answer any questions you have about the two items.
Eric or Kim, one of the things that was presented yesterday, and maybe it's in our packet and I didn't see it, but it's how we're doing on spending the money on the acquisition costs. And could you tell the whole board about that?
You know, I need to probably bring that back to you. I don't have those figures today, but David, is that something that you recall?
Yes, sir. Roughly, right now we've spent about half the budgeted money for property acquisition, but there's still some other expenses in there, so we'll be able to report to you later.
But generally speaking, we have budgeted about $18 million, and we spent about half of it. Is that kind of where we are?
That's correct. That's correct. We still have those two parcels, and there's still some other expenses, but we're in very good shape as far as the acquisition.
I totally concur with that.
Thank you. Okay. That brings us to item 12, David. Welcome to the podium, and thanks for all the good work you and your staff are doing to help us with all these subcommittee meetings and today as well.
Well, thank you. Would like to just reiterate a few things on each of the subcommittees. Some of these things have been mentioned, but with the trails, the master plan for the sidewalk continues, and the trails design for the river trails continues also, the two sections that we have ongoing. Wellness Center, Mr. Williams described that the interviews for operating partners continue. I think that's become a very good process. And Ms. Lowe mentioned that the master plan design has begun with Hargraves. We had a great meeting yesterday. Also, the historical structures survey continues within the park property. Transit, the acquisition of the Santa Fe station continues. We hope to have that in a few months. And also, the consultant contract was mentioned. We're currently in negotiations with Jacobs on that. With the river, a couple of things to add is construction has begun on the lighting project down there for the night rowing, and also the notice to architects and engineers for Phase 2 has been sent out. So we're starting that second phase at the Oklahoma River. Fairgrounds, the master plan continues that along with the Phase 1 improvements. So everything's going well.
Great.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions for David?
David, have we approved all of the project requirements for each of the projects?
We have not approved the transit project requirements. That's the only one that we still have.
Are we going to publish those or post those somewhere?
They are.
I want to get a copy of the final ones. I didn't know whether just go print them or are we going to publish something.
They are available, but I can send those to you.
Okay.
They're available on the web.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks, David. Appreciate the great work you and the staff are doing. And you got a great lawyer, too. Thanks, Amanda. Comments by board? I wanted to mention one thing. Maybe Kim said this and I missed it, but one of the things that George Hargraves said yesterday, that he had just returned from London, the people that are going to do the master plan for our park, and they did a huge park and waterway there that will be prominently featured in the Olympics. And it might be, I thought that might be something of interest as you watch the Olympics this weekend and a couple of weeks ahead, to know that they did that. Pretty interesting stuff. Okay, anything else from staff, Eric or David? Okay, well, this is the opportunity for citizens that are with us that would like to be heard by the Citizens Advisory Board. Are there comments from citizens? Councilman McAtee, it's always good to have you with us. If there are no other business, would someone like to move we adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks for coming.